Welcome to WAPW Sports. You might recognize this voice from other channels such as We Are Pro Wrestling and the WAPW Podcast. But probably one thing you did not know about me is I love sports. Football, both college and pro, basketball, both college and pro, baseball, hockey. I love sports. Besides wrestling, that's another thing that I love sports. So I decided that I'm going to be doing some sports videos here specifically on this channel, WAPW Sports. And what you may ask will be on this channel, it will be, as the title of this video says, questions and answers. I may be doing topic videos, list videos, whatever. If something sparks my interest, I'm going to do a video on that specifically here on this channel for my sports. And it might be a weekly video, it may be multi-weekly. I could do a video every day if I wanted to, or it may be once every couple weeks. Who knows? If something sparks my interest, I'm going to do a video on it. So, yeah. Mainly, it may be just questions and answers coming up, but you never know. If you want to ask me a question for these questions and answers, link in the description to my ask.fm that is specifically for sports. Let me emphasize that. Specifically for sports. I have a wrestling ask.fm, so I decided, you know what? I'm going to open an ask.fm specifically for sports. Ask your questions, whether it's college football, college basketball, pro basketball, hockey, baseball, whatever. The only thing I ask is don't ask questions about soccer, tennis, golf, NASCAR. It's like nothing against those sports, but I don't know much about them. I'm not a big fan of those sports. I'm a fan of football, basketball, baseball, and hockey. So that's what I'm going to be talking about. So ask questions about that. Link in the description, ask.fm. So welcome to this channel. Help this channel to grow by clicking the subscribe button, and let's begin. Alright, first up, what are your favorite rivalries of the Tigers, Red Wings, Lions, Pistons, Michigan Wolverines, and Michigan State Spartans? Start off with the Tigers. I gotta go with the Cleveland Indians. I always look forward to those games. Lately, they've been deciding division titles. But really, the history of the Tigers-Indians rivalry, it's like one team was great, the other team has sucked, and then it's vice versa. Or both teams have sucked. It's never been both teams have been great. The Tigers are great, and the Indians are good, but not great yet. But always look forward to Tigers-Indians games, and that's that. For the Detroit Red Wings, nothing against any rivalry between the Red Wings and the original six, but for my money, my favorite Red Wings rivalry, and one of the best rivalries in the history of the NHL, Detroit Red Wings, Colorado Avalanche. If you are a fan of hockey or were a fan of hockey during the late 90s, early 2000s, you will agree that the Red Wings Avalanche feud was the best feud in the sport. The brawls, the goalie fights, intense playoff matchups, that feud right there. Even though it was a 7-year rivalry, that rivalry right there is one of the best rivalries in the history of hockey. Amazing. For the Detroit Lions, it's got to be the Green Bay Packers. I mean, granted, Lions, Bears, and Lions Vikings are also good, but Lions Packers just have something to it. It historically has been a great rivalry, dating back decades to the 60s and the 70s. Throughout just the entire history of both teams, that feud has been amazing. Historical games. Lions costing Packers an undefeated season. Packers causing the Lions to go 0-16. The streak of losing for the Lions in Green Bay, the playoff games in the 90s, just amazing rivalry between the two. Hell, the Lions' last win on Thanksgiving was against the Green Bay Packers, so Lions Packers is the Lions' best feud. For the Detroit Pistons, it's got to be the Chicago Bulls. I mean, you know, Pistons Celtics has been good, but hasn't been good lately. Pistons Lakers historically, so many finals against each other, dating back to the early days of the NBA, and even within the last decade or so. Pistons Lakers has been a good rivalry, but Pistons Bulls, especially during the Bad Boys Jordan era, that is the apex of Pistons Bulls. It's really been dormant since, the Bad Boys were done and Jordan and the Bulls went on their dynasty, but it's still a good rivalry. I always look forward to those games. Those games are typically good, especially in the playoffs. Now, for the Wolverines and the Spartans, I decided to split it up in between football and basketball because really for both, it's different. Now, for Michigan in football, there is no question. My favorite rivalry of Michigan football, and I'm being biased, totally being biased here. The greatest rivalry in college football history, one of the greatest rivalries in the history of all sports, Michigan, Ohio State. That game right there is the one game I always look forward to every single year in sports, period. Michigan, Ohio State. And that game, while lately it hasn't been quite a rivalry, just go back, especially in the 90s when I started watching football. Michigan, Ohio State. When Ohio State was the best football team in the state of Ohio, including the Browns and the Bengals, Ohio State was amazing. Michigan would cost them an undefeated season. 97, Michigan eventually got that national championship. Just back and forth, great rivalry right there. And again, it hasn't been such a great rivalry lately, but it's still always an important game right there. One of the games I always look forward to every single year. For Michigan State, I'm going to go with Penn State. Michigan State, Penn State, the Land Grant Trophy game has always been interesting. And yeah, granted, a lot of Penn State's wins lately in that game has been vacated with the whole Paterno, Sandusky, all that stuff. But that game has always been interesting, has really determined sometimes a Big Ten title, maybe a bowl appearance, whatever. That game has always been good. And for Michigan and Michigan State basketball, I have to go with each other. For Wolverines, their biggest rival in basketball is Michigan State. And for Michigan State, their biggest rival in basketball is Michigan. I mean, that game determined Big Ten titles. Both regular season and the tournament. Just awesome games. And in college basketball, it's not to the level of Carolina Duke or other rivalries like that, but Michigan and Michigan State is a great college basketball rivalry, and for each other, it's my favorite for each. All right, next up, the top 5 worst NFL franchises from 2000 to current. Oh boy, this one was easy. The first 3 I thought of were the easiest. The other 2 were a bit hard, but then I'm like, you know what? Yeah, it wasn't that hard. It's in no particular order, but the first one I'm gonna mention has been the worst team in the NFL. Period. Since the year 2000. That's my Detroit Lions. Don't get me wrong, I bleed lion blue, and I have bled lion blue for years. But I'm not going to be a blind fan, and I'm not going to kid myself and thinking the Lions have been good, period. They have been terrible. Yes, the last couple years they've had a roar. They've been competitive somewhat, but, take that away. From 2000 to 2008, the Lions have been awful. Terrible. horrible draft picks. I mean, guys like Charles Rogers and Joey Harrington and Roy Williams and Mike Williams, and just bad overall. Matt Millen is their president, GM, whatever. He sucked. Bad coaches, just bad on the field. Sometimes they weren't even good enough to be bad. They were just plain awful. And of course, 0-16 in 2008. Enough said. The Cleveland Browns. I know this is from 2000 to current, but since they came back in the league in 1999, the Browns have been one of the most inept franchises, period. They've been awful. They have gone through more quarterbacks than some teams have their entire franchise history. I mean, the Cleveland Browns, they have never had a stable quarterback ever. Go through the list of every Browns quarterback since they came back into the league. They haven't had a stable one, period. They've all been bad. Behind the scenes in the office has been bad. Their play on the field's been terrible. They're awful. The Oakland Raiders. And yeah, I know some people are going to say, oh, well, they made the Super Bowl in 2002. Yeah, what the fuck have they done since? They have done shit since they last made the Super Bowl. They have been awful. Al Davis in his last years, God rest his soul, but seriously, in Al Davis's last years on Earth, he'd had no fucking clue what he was doing. They went through bad draft picks, went through terrible coaches. They drafted arguably the biggest bust in NFL history in Jamarcus Russell. They have, yes, they've had a couple 8-8 years, but they have just been terrible. They've been awful since 2000. Yeah, minus, a couple years there in the early part, but they've been terrible since their last Super Bowl appearance. The Arizona Cardinals. Take away the 2-year Kurt Warner renaissance, the Arizona Cardinals have been awful. And I mean, it's not just been since 2000. It's been their entire franchise's history. They get a playoff game here and there. And yeah, the Kurt Warner renaissance for 2 years. But take that away, the Arizona Cardinals have been horrible. Bad quarterbacks, bad play. They were a cupcake for years. Doormat for years. And yeah, they're somewhat competitive this year, but still, take away a couple of those competitive years and the Kurt Warner renaissance, and the Cardinals have been awful. And this last team, they've been mediocre on the field, but for their stuff in the front office, you have to put the Washington Redskins as one of the top 5 worst NFL franchises since 2000. I mean, yeah, again, their play on the field has been kind of mediocre. Yeah, playoff appearance here or there. But take that away, and you look at their front office and what they've done and put on the field. Yeah, they try to win the NFL season in March and April. We're going to sign free agents and we're going to win. And they haven't done shit. From signing Bruce Smith and Deion Sanders past their prime. It's like, hey, they signed the 1992 All-Pro team, but it was 2000. They only signed Bruce Smith so he could break the sack record, and Deion wasn't the same Deion because it was 2000. The infamous Adam Archuleta signing and the biggest free agent signing bust of all time, Albert Hainsworth. Daniel Snyder, you're a moron. Just bad play. Again, mediocre play on the field, but just bad coaching, bad ownership, bad everything. It's like, there you go. I mean, if you could think of a worse franchise since 2000, I mean, yes, Bills have been there. I mean, you could throw the Texans in there. You could throw in a few other teams. But the Lions, Browns, Raiders, Cardinals, and Redskins, 5 worst franchises, in my opinion, since the year 2000. Terrible. Okay, realistically, how far do you think the Lions are going this season? Granted they lost to Pittsburgh yesterday, but I'm not too worried as of yet. They got 6 games left, and realistically, I think they could go 4-2 to end the year, maybe even 5-1. But they have to beat Green Bay on Thanksgiving. That is a must-win game, and it all depends on if Aaron Rodgers comes back or not. If he comes back, it's going to be a tough day. If it's Scott Tolzien starting, then I like the Lions' chances in that. But I think they could go 5-1 or 4-2 to end the year. They have to beat Green Bay on Thanksgiving. They right now are in a great spot where they control their own destiny in the NFC North. I think they can win the NFC North. They would get their first home playoff game in 20 years. And I think they could maybe get one playoff win, but all I care about is them getting the playoffs, which I think they can do right now. But the must win, they have to beat Green Bay on Thanksgiving. How would you rank Eli Manning, Phillip Rivers, and Ben Roethlisberger? Eli 1, Roethlisberger 2, Rivers 3. I mean, Eli with his 2 Super Bowl wins against Tom Brady, Roethlisberger right out of the gate winning Super Bowls. Phillip Rivers has a lot of catching up to do. I mean, not to knock Rivers or anything, but he hasn't won anything yet. So until he can win something, maybe get out of San Diego and win something, I can't rank Rivers, any higher than third out of the 3, but it's Eli, Big Ben, and Rivers. Thoughts on the 2003 Carolina Panthers Super Bowl run? Amazing turnaround, one of the best turnarounds in NFL history. As you think about the Panthers 2 years prior to that, they were 1-15, the worst team in football. They cost George Seifert the Hall of Fame. They were just bad. And then to think 2 years later, they were a John Casey out-of-bounds kick away from beating Tom Brady in the Super Bowl. Imagine if the Panthers did win that Super Bowl. Maybe the legend of Brady isn't there. But, hindsight is what it is. But thoughts on the Panthers Super Bowl run? It was an amazing turnaround from where they were just 2 years earlier. If Joe Montana did not get hurt in the 1990 NFC Championship game, how different would Steve Young's career have been going forward? Well, to be perfectly honest, I don't think Steve Young would have been a Hall of Famer. Because if Montana didn't get hurt, 49ers win that game, 49ers curb stomp the Bills in the Super Bowl, and I think the 49ers could have won another Super Bowl after that and win 4 in a row. Hell, they could have even won 5 in a row. I mean, Montana was doing so great. And even when Montana wasn't what he was still the best in the league. I mean, he had a career high in passing yards in 1990. He was great. Then he got hurt, and he missed essentially 2 seasons, and then he was gone. But I think Montana, had he not gotten hurt, he would have been the starter still for the 49ers. Young wouldn't have seen the field probably ever as a 49er, except in backup situation. He would have probably been let go from the 49ers, and I can almost guarantee he wouldn't have been a Hall of Famer. And that would have been a damn shame because Steve Young he was a great quarterback. But if Montana doesn't get hurt, Steve Young doesn't go in. Just saying. Most underrated team in NBA history, the 2001-2002 Sacramento Kings. That is a fucking crime that team did not win an NBA championship. You look at that team. Look at the roster of that Sacramento Kings team from 2001-2002. That team was amazing. They won the most games in the NBA that year. You could argue they were the best team in the NBA period that year. They were the greatest show on court, sort of like the greatest show on turf. That team was amazing. They got screwed in the Western Conference Final, and fuck you, David Stern. Damn crime that Kings team did not win an NBA championship. The best player to never win a Super Bowl, easily Barry Sanders. He's the best running back in the history of football. Amazing. And a damn crime he never even made a Super Bowl. I mean, you switch Barry Sanders and Emmitt Smith, you put Barry on the Cowboys and Emmett on the Lions. I don't think Emmett does the same with the Lions, but Barry, I think Barry runs for 20,000 plus yards as a Cowboy. It's a damn shame Barry never made a Super Bowl, but easily the best player to never win a Super Bowl. The best player to never win a World Series is Ted Williams, and that's probably a player that most people of my age range have probably, if they've heard of him but they don't know much about him, look up his numbers and, try to argue about any other player being the best to never win a World Series. The best player to never win an NBA championship, Elgin Baylor, without a doubt, and it's a damn shame. When Elgin Baylor retired 9 games into 71-72, he missed out on that 33-game winning streak and missed out on the NBA championship that year. It's a damn shame. Yeah, the Lakers gave him a win. They gave him a ring, but Baylor wasn't an active player of the team, thus never officially an NBA champion. It's a damn shame. Baylor was an amazing player, and the fact that he had to retire 9 games into that great season for the Lakers, damn shame. Alright, the last question. The best Detroit Tigers, Red Wings, Lions, and Pistons team in history. So the best Tigers team, the best Red Wings team, the best Lions team, and the best Pistons team in their franchise's history. For the Detroit Tigers, it's a no-brainer. There really is little dispute on this one. The 1984 team, the last Tigers team to win a World Series. I mean, I can't believe it's been almost 30 years. But that 84 team, the best Tigers team in history, one of the best teams in baseball history, fucking phenomenal. Started the year 35-5, won the World Series. Just that team was so great, and so many players on that team are among top 50 in their position in baseball history. You look at a lot of those players among the top 50 in their respective positions in baseball history. Phenomenal. It's a damn shame that none of them are in the Hall of Fame. Jack Morris has a chance, but, Trammell should have already been in there. That team was awesome. Sparky Anderson, one of the best managers in baseball history. 84 team was phenomenal. For the Detroit Red Wings, the 95-96 team. And yeah, they've won the most Stanley Cups of any United States team. Not most all time, that's the Canadians, but for most cups for a U.S. team, that belongs to the Red Wings. But that 95-96 team, they did not win the Stanley Cup that year, but they won the most games and had the most team points in NHL history. That team was phenomenal. For the Detroit Lions, they've had a lot of bad teams in history, but their best team, I would have to say, 1970. Yes, they won championships in the 50s, but that 1970 team was great as well. Great defense. Their first 2 games, they outscored their opponents. Like, they almost had 80 points to their opponent's 3 in the first 2 games. It was ridiculous. Lem Barney and Dick LeBeau at defensive back. That defense was great. It's a damn shame that they never had a great offense to back that D up, because if they did, maybe they would have won a championship. That 1970 Lions team, probably their best team. And for the Detroit Pistons, I mean, the 88-89 team, the Bad Boys, their first of back-to-back NBA championships. That team, like the 84 Tigers, that 88-89 Pistons team, one of the best Pistons team of all time, and you could argue one of the best teams in NBA history. I mean, that defense was phenomenal. And you look at those players, I mean, you want to compile a list of the greatest Pistons of all time, you will have about half of that list. If it's a top 10, let's just say, half of that list would probably belong to most of the players on this 88-89 Pistons team. Lambeer and Thomas and Dumars, and just phenomenal team. And Coach Daly was awesome. Just 88-89, the Bad Boys. Enough said on that one. Honorable mentions for these teams, for the Tigers, You throw in the Denny McClain team that won the World Series. You could throw in 2006 as an honorable mention for the Red Wings, their back-to-back championship years, their championship in 2002. You throw in those teams. For the Detroit Lions, you throw in 1957. You could throw in 1991, their last real chance at a championship ever. For the Pistons, the year after 88-89 when the Bad Boys won their second championship. 2003-2004 is one of the most underrated teams in NBA history next to the 01-02 Kings, and that team didn't have a true star on it, that 03-04 Pistons team. Those are just some honorable mentions, but for best teams for the respective franchises: 84 Tigers, 95-96 Pistons, the 1970 Lions, and the 88-89 Pistons. So there you go. First Q&A. Didn't get a lot of questions, but not a lot of people knew about my Ask.fm for my sports channel. So if you want to ask a question for a future Q&A, send your question to the Ask.fm link below, specifically sports, football, basketball, baseball, and hockey. There you go. And who knows what other videos I may be doing. I may be doing hot topic video. I may be doing, whatever sparks my interest. I'm going to do a video on that here on this sports channel. So if you're new to this channel, help this channel to grow by clicking the subscribe button. And until my next video, peace.